I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Unleashed AF podcast with myself, Deidre Beecham, the Visibility Catalyst, and my co-host, Jenny Badig, the Inner Space Engineer. For those of you that are new here, again, I'm the Visibility Catalyst, and we love having you here. And each week we have a new topic we discuss. This week we have a special guest, and we're super excited about having her here. But before we go, I want to make sure that Jenny has a moment to introduce herself. Jenny, take it away.
Yes, so I am Jenny Badig, Inner Space Engineer, something I call myself now because of my human factors engineering background, and then more recently my hypnotherapy background. So I can engineer the inner space and the inner mind. And the other thing I wanted to make sure people are aware is that we always love hearing from our listeners, our watchers, our followers. So don't hesitate to comment on the video as you watch it. We want to make it a dynamic, interactive discussion. So you can also actually contribute and make suggestions on the topics that we cover in the pods each week. So there's a section on our website, which is unleashedafpodcast.com, where you can submit your suggestions or questions or ideas. That section is called WWJDD for What Would Jenny and Deidre Do? Or if you would like to be a guest on our podcast and talk about something that you're passionate about when it comes to getting unleashed and the different tools that have helped you unleash yourself from things, then you can fill out a guest application on our website as well.
Awesome. And every single week, we always want to make sure that we are bringing either a topic or a guest to help to bring out your greatness and your authentic self. And today could not be a better guest for just that. Let me pull up a little intro here for our guest, Amber Powers. Let me go ahead and put her on the stage. This is Amber Powers, and she is a shining example of resilience and strength, working hard to dismantle the falsehoods she once embraced as truths. Gosh, don't we all do that? She left the cult she was raised in. I can't wait to talk about this. Left the cult she raised in and emerged as a successful entrepreneur. Once a woman whose voice was oppressed, Amber is dedicated to helping others bravely embrace their voice and their purpose. In a world subconsciously consumed with keeping women's voices silent, preach it. She helps women navigate to find out who they really are outside of who others told them they are. I guess that's the end.
Who they should be.
Okay, sounds good. Amber, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Fucking kick-ass intro.
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, really brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Sure.
Tell us, you grew up in a cult.
I did. Yeah, the first line of the book I just wrote basically says, as I was toddling towards my second birthday, 2 members of my family were killed in the Jonestown Massacre. And so I have a very rich history of family, not just engaging in, but like flocking to these cults where they are under the control of someone else. And before we get too deep into my story in particular, I just want to say that we all are susceptible to programming. And this has been shown time and time again through scientific experiments where people think that they're immune to being programmed. We are not. We are constantly programming our minds. That's why it's so important what we watch. It's so important what we read, what we consume, the spaces that we fill. So I just want to call that out. I have a special story, and so does everybody else. So I am special in that I'm not that special.
Right.
Except you are speaking out about it. Not everybody
Yeah.
has the courage to do that. And I think that does, in a way, that does make you special. But the beautiful thing about it is that by you stepping out and being courageous and sharing your story, it's a ripple effect and can allow other people to have the courage and strength as well. So it's a beautiful thing that you're doing.
Absolutely. That was, it took me 2 years to complete my book, maybe even a little bit more than 2 years, which is longer than it should have taken me. Although it happened in exactly the right amount of time.
Right.
But if you were to compare me with others who are writing their book, I had a lot of healing that I didn't know needed to happen as I wrote my book. And when I first sent it to my publisher, her response was, well, those are words. And the best advice she gave me was, first of all, great job, because you've taken the big step, like you were saying, Deidre. Most people don't take the time to write a book. 1% of people actually write a book. And so I did that. I wrote down the words, and I am speaking out about it. But one of the most scary parts of this was understanding that as I wrote my book, I was going to be offending a lot of people. Most of my family still went to the church that I was a part of. And so family and friends that were my only real family and friends growing up, I was going to be alienating as a result of writing this. And so it took enormous courage. And I absolutely am so proud of myself for learning to love myself, because this book was a practice in self-love.
And can we back up and talk for just a second, because you brought up something that is really, really poignant, and I think necessary for a lot of women's healing journey, which is being able to put themselves first rather than the abuser first. Worrying about the whether it's a system or it's a person or it's a relationship, whatever that is, there's the people pleasing that a lot of women grow up with, that nice girl syndrome, and nice girl training. When you grow up, and then everything is all about making sure the other person isn't inconvenienced, that the other person isn't hurt, that the system can still stay in place because you're not supposed to say anything. So to stand up against something that is such an ingrained part of who you are, it is, I can say from my own personal experience, it is absolutely terrifying. And so I just don't want to just brush over it, because what you accomplished is huge. Absolutely huge.
It is huge, and it was terrifying. And the people that I work with, I make it very clear, if you are not ready to let go, it is not time for us to work together. Because there has to be a radical understanding that you are going to have to, it is a mandate, you are going to have to step away from toxic relationships, whether, again, like you said, Deidre, whether it's a person or a community or a society. You are going to have to be willing to do it scared. That's it. Because there are going to have to be some releases that happen. And what I have learned in my process of healing is that I actually love those people more now that I have separated myself from them.
Yes.
I have a deep compassion for them, and not a pity. It is not a pity at all.
But I would argue that part of the reason for that, and tell me if you agree or disagree. I'm
Sure.
fully open to a conversation about this. But
I
do you
missed you.
not?
Sorry.
It's okay. Do you not agree that, or think that part of that reason that you are able to have compassion and love for people who previously were in a relationship of oppressing you?
Mhm.
Don't you think that part of it is that because you have come to a place of love for yourself, a love and
Oh,
acceptance
yeah.
for yourself, and because of that, you can have compassion for where they are in the struggle that they still have to go through, that you've already attained?
That is such a beautiful way to put that, Deidre, and you're 100% correct. I had heard in the past when people said you can't really love somebody else until you fully love yourself. I didn't know what that meant because I never fully loved myself. And I'm
Yeah.
still on a journey to fully loving myself. I think it's an ever evolving journey, but God, I love myself so much more than I used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Um,
incredible. I think it's like a layering, because
yeah,
there's so many years, depending on when somebody actually starts this work.
right.
There's so many layers of the people pleaser, the self-protection, there's all of these layers that have to be pulled back, and every time you pull back a layer, there's another layer or another element to, or a
Yes,
depth to that thing that you used to protect yourself with,
absolutely.
that needs to be released.
100%. Absolutely. Um, and I did. I ended up losing 2/3 of my family as a result of writing this book.
Wow.
Maybe more. That's just a rough estimate. Um, and that's okay, because what I have done is I have intentionally built a family that is small in nature, and they are not all biological family. They are friends and loved ones that um, they are intentional about how they live their lives. They are not victims of what has happened to them. They are literally creating the life that they want to live by being intentional, by intentionally choosing who they surround themselves with, and choosing their thoughts that they choose to like sit and be with. And to me, that is what helps us elevate as human beings.
Mm-hmm. And that's you being intentional about including them in your life
Right.
because of that, right?
Exactly.
And not just default, oh, they're family, so you have to be nice to them, or you have to deal with whatever they're dishing out or whatever. So it's important. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, because it's not typically part of how you're trained as a kid to just
Mhm.
walk away if a family member is not nice to you. Right? We've talked
Yeah.
about this before, Deidre, about, oh no, you have to be nice. Go give Uncle so-and-so a hug, or go. No.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one specific instance, and I think this has been used against me a couple of times, but there was one particular instance that stands out where a relative came to me and she was like, your mother would roll in her grave if she knew, the beliefs that you hold. And she said what many of us, if not all of us, have heard, and that is blood is thicker than water. And I said, I beg to differ. I choose those who I surround myself with. Blood does not mandate you having a place in my life, period. I
Correct.
choose my people. And
Yep.
I think that fear and manipulation and guilt are often such a big part of people who are becoming, right? The initial title of my book before Michelle Obama released her book was going to be Becoming. And then
Doggone it, Michelle.
I know. Give it back.
That's when you know it was a good idea.
What's crazy about the blood is thicker than water quote? Do you know that it's actually a misrepresentation of the original quote?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so do research sometime, but it's actually the original quote is actually, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which was shortened to blood is thicker than water. But if you look at
Wow.
the original one, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, meaning basically that your chosen bonds
Right.
are more important than your family bonds.
That's
So
so
they
interesting. Oh my
shortened
God.
it to completely change the meaning.
You just gave me some content for my marketing, Deidre.
Yeah, it goes
I
on to
love
say
that.
a covenant and an agreement, often made with a blood sacrifice, and water of the room refers to the amniotic sac fluid. So, there you go. Your chosen
Wow.
family is more important than the family that you're born into.
That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Like, I feel like a part of me healed because while
Awesome.
I know that logically, my heart still misses what I
Sure.
thought I had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the unhealed version of me very deeply was connected to those traumatic and unhealthy connections. And there are parts of us that, as we're going through our healing journey, we think back to those good times. Not that they weren't good, but some of them were very unhealthy.
Yeah.
But I still do look back fondly and I send them love every single time I think of them. I truly don't hold any animosity toward them while they did hurt me. And it does hurt to not be accepted as the person that you are showing up to be, as the most authentic version of yourself. It hurts to not be chosen. But when you decide to choose yourself, that trumps everything.
Yeah. That's
That trumps
beautiful.
everything.
When you choose to choose yourself, it's so true.
Yeah.
I
And
love
I
that.
think part of that is because then it's real,
Absolutely.
right? There's no
You can't
question of
fool
whether it
yourself.
was manipulated or whatever. It's
Right.
like, yeah, that makes it more powerful. And I wanted to just mention one thing about what you kind of started out talking about, that everybody has stories of being kind of influenced or whatever. And I think it's great to not only have that awareness, but to point it out from the get-go so that everybody can kind of understand there's little bits and pieces that they can relate to in your story. They may have gone through a completely different situation in their life, but you can still relate to different aspects of the story, of the lessons from the story.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
honestly, I've told, I don't know how many clients over the years that they should write a book. I'm like, the stuff that you've overcome, and they often don't give themselves credit for what
Absolutely.
they've overcome. Right. They still feel like they're less than or weak or whatever. But man, I think, and that's part of why I think doing something big, like writing a book about it and going through that process, helps kind of put a stake in the ground where you're like, okay, I can hold on here now. Right. Instead of feeling like, oh, I've clawed my way up a little bit and then, oh, it seems like something keeps knocking me back down. No, I've accomplished this. I've overcome this. So I think
Right.
like Deidre was saying, it's a huge accomplishment to go through writing a book, not just writing a book, but writing a book about your own personal experience. Right. I mean, it's hard enough just to write a book and put it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for anybody who has, and it's Jenny, usually it's people who have been through immense trauma, who have overcome crazy obstacles, who we look at, because this is what happened with me. People kept telling me, why haven't you written a book? And I'm like, well, I've been through some stuff, but everybody goes through some stuff. And you don't realize exactly how much you go through until you're in this process of like telling it to others. And one of the magical things that happened with me, and I'm sure with other authors, it would be the same story, if not, similar. There's a transformation from victim to victor when you get it down on paper. Because since I've written my book, you know how a lot of actors won't watch their own film? I wanted to sit down and read my book after everybody else had it. Everybody else had their copy. I wanted to get a copy for myself to read it from like a third person perspective and try to remove myself as much as I could from that. And I've read that book 3 times now. I overcame a shit ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer the victim of that. That is my story.
Right.
It is what molded me into the person that I have become up to this point. And in 2 or 3 years, it's going to be a different story. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of people who, I mean, like you said, a lot of people that we look to in the public eye that have huge stories of overcoming things. It's because they kind of either hit rock bottom or something was so traumatic that they had to overcome. And I've even talked to people about, it's almost like hitting bottom like that, or having things feel like they're like can't get any worse, becomes like the launching point that can really just catapult you through to doing that work. Maybe you were talking about it took you longer than it would take other people, but I would say with all the healing work and all the, even just the red tape of making the book process happen,
Right. Yeah.
I think maybe it's quicker than what a lot of people would do. And that's probably why there's only 1% of people that actually get it done, because a lot of them may start and just never finish.
I
So
started it literally 16 times. I would start writing in a spiral bound notebook and just put it down, because I needed somebody to hold me accountable to finishing it. That's the only reason I hired a publisher. And I knew that they had the editing team to make it possible. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really incredible. So how long, I mean, we just kind of glazed over the story itself, but so how long were you in the cult? I mean, at what age were you able to get out or even realize you were in a cult?
So I was born into it. So literally from jump, my brain was being programmed. It was when I was 16 years old. So just to kind of give you, instead of jumping from born to when we leave, just to give you a little bit of an idea of sort of the belief systems that we were taught. We were taught that we were the only people going to heaven, that there would only be 144,000 in the bride of Christ. So you had to be the most perfect of perfect beings in order to make it to seventh heaven. There were other layers to heaven, but it wasn't like with Jesus heaven, right? The church that I was raised in did not teach a literal hell. However, at an early age, I was a seeker. And so back in the day when you could drop your kids off at a bookstore and leave them for hours while you did your shopping, that's what my parents did. And I would plop myself down in the theology section and read all of the books from witchcraft to the most dispensationalist evangelical Christian books and everything in between.
wow.
And so it was there that I learned of the literal version of hell, which scared the shit out of me. And so not only did I have the cult that I was being raised in programming my mind, now I had these other Christian theologies doing the same thing. And so having to believe that I had to be perfect in order to live eternally, it fucked with my mind in a big way. And so when it came time for us to leave, I was 16. There was a lot of talk in the church about having a school kind of added on to the church, which to me, I wanted that. I felt like such an outsider in my school. Nobody believed the same way I did. Nobody had to dress the way I did. Nobody had the same beliefs that I did. I really wasn't understood. On top of now understanding that I'm very likely autistic and ADHD, like I was just a different child. I was a foot taller than everybody else my entire school career. I wore a size 11 shoe by the time I was 10 years old. Like, good grief, how much more different can this chick be, right? And so I just so desperately wanted to fit in. I didn't understand the value of standing out.
That's beautiful.
When I was 16, we got a phone call after our morning service. And the phone call was from my fiance's cousin, my cousin's fiance. And she said, hey, church is getting ready to start, but you guys aren't here. Is everything okay? And I had to listen to my mother tell her, we will never be coming back to that church. And for a 16-year-old who was taught that this is the only way to make it to heaven, my mother ripped heaven out from under me in 2.3 seconds. It was gone. My hope at eternal life was gone just like that.
Wow.
And So my mom and dad attended many different denominations of churches, mostly charismatic Pentecostal, and ultimately ended up at an apostolic church. I, on the other hand, I was 16, I could drive. I would go to church there every once in a while. And then also I would go to a church that had broken off from that initial church back in the 70s because they still had the same theology. They still had the same belief set. It's just that they were no longer a part of that particular group of churches. And so I felt like that was my only chance at heaven. So I continued to go there up until it was right around the time that I got married the first time. So I was around 21. So for about 5 years, I continued on with that same or similar theology. And I left probably around 21 or 22. I won't say I left behind the theology or the belief system entirely. I still clung to parts of it. But for the most part, I left the church around 21 or 22.
Yeah, and if I remember, I did read your book. When it first came out, I got a copy and read it on Kindle. And you kind of sought out other religions at that time too, right? To find like a new home, a new place that felt more comfortable for you.
I did. One of my relatives she lived in Western Indiana, and she had gone to a non-denominational church, but it felt enough like in its practice the church that I was raised in. But also it had some leniency, like people wore jeans to church, and I was like,
And they can still get to heaven?
right. And the sermons were very well done. They like kept my attention. They kept me interested. And so I tried some non-denominational churches, and that's ultimately what I landed on for the most part. And it wasn't until I started back to college. So I had walked away from college right before I got married. I finished up my degree. I think I was 26, 27, something like that. And in college, I had the opportunity to test out from either business ethics, because my degree was in business management. So I could test out of business ethics to get my degree, or he gave me the option to test out of intro to world religions. And everybody else in my class chose business ethics because it was easy. I, on the other hand, the normal one, chose intro to world religions. And I'll never forget when I sat down with him to actually take the test, he said, I have to ask you, like, you're the only one that chose intro to world religions. Why? And I said, well, I was raised very sheltered and I don't know anything about other religions except for my own. And I'm in college and I'm here to learn. So I want to learn that. And he was like, good luck. But in studying for that intro to world religions quiz or test, I started to see some parallels between all of the different ideologies and theologies and philosophies. And I started to really question Christianity at all, like, period. And I made the mistake of sharing that with my mother, to which resulted in a silent treatment that lasted, I think, close to 2 months. And it ultimately made me go back to living a life and putting on the mask that somebody else wanted me to wear. And that was the majority of my life until I hit my 40s. And in my 40s was when I said, enough, I'm done. The second half of my life, this is a gift that I've been given to have the second half of my life, and I'm going to do it my way.
Amen.
Yeah. Good for you. So I'd like to go back to the book, if you don't mind, because you had talked about, in kind of our pre podcast that that was really a pivotal. You didn't understand just how much more healing you had to do until you were writing that book. So talk about that. What was so surprising and yeah, what was so surprising for you?
I think a lot of it had to do with writing about my mom. My mom was physically abusive. I have some definite mother wounds that I still tend to this day. I've had to reparent myself largely, as well as sexual trauma. Like in writing the book, it's so interesting because my entire life has sexually been one filled with shame and guilt for being a sexual being at all. And, you know, having been so young, when I did experience sexual trauma, I didn't realize how it was exhibiting, right? And how it exhibited as a child was anytime my parents started to get intimate, I lost my entire shit.
Wow.
I would not let them be alone. Anytime I heard kissing, anytime I heard any kind of, you know, sexual anything happening, I would go banging on their door. Because to me, that was like, get off my mom. You know what I mean? There was something really deeply disturbing to me that my dad would hurt my mom in that way. And so an understanding of that trauma and how it has, how the trauma has surfaced in my life, how it has displayed in my life, even in searching for my own mates, like the people that I picked. And they were inevitably people who continued to hurt me, to rape me. You might want to put a trigger warning on this. But there was a lot of decisions that I made to bring people into my life. Again, fault not on me. We all have autonomy in deciding what we do with our bodies. But I did select people that I should have had red flags. I should have seen the red flags, and I chose to dismiss them.
Yeah, but sometimes don't you think that comes from, you know what you know. And there's, even when something is incredibly uncomfortable or damaging, you know what you know.
Yeah.
And there's a comfort in knowing how that works. I mean, that's the same thing with poverty. If, you know, people can be very comfortable with being uncomfortable in poverty because it's what they know. And so the thinking stays the same.
Yes,
so
that's true.
I would just caution using the word should. You know, I should have this, I should have that. You didn't know at the time. And
absolutely,
you know,
and honestly, at the time, the instance that I'm specifically referring to was, it was another time I was masking. I was trying to find the perfect man that everybody else wanted me to be with, because that's the man that they told me I was supposed to be with. And so I got onto a Christian dating website thinking that certainly no one from there would hurt me.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, guess what happened, right? And so you're right, Deidre. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're welcome. It's interesting you're talking about this. I was reading, I know it's not the same, but it kind of relates in a weird way. Just hang with me. But was reading an account of slaves, and one of the things that one of the slaves was talking about was that the harshest, cruelest owners were actually the Christian wives. That they were always scared when they were told they were being sent to a Christian household, but even more so if the female of the house was given leeway to, if they went to work for the woman, it was always the worst, was the Christian woman. And so it's really interesting to hear that, you know, that now today, it's still happening where there's this viewpoint or this ideology that somebody that's religious or Christian or whatever, that they're good and they're honest. And well, not necessarily. And that's just such a blanket statement. We're all human.
That's right.
And sometimes that, being able to have the control and the rules and knowing what to say and how to be, sometimes that attracts the very people that we're trying to get away from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, fascinating. So let's see. So we have your bite, which was, or your leash. You had tons and tons of leashes, right? So you had your leashes of family, religion. What other kind of leashes do we have? Jenny, jump in here.
Societal norms.
Oh, societal norms. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now the bite you talked about was your book, right? The book was so much of how you were able to start making a lot of even more changes, because I know you had to make a lot of changes and even to start writing the book. I get that.
Right.
But you said the book was huge. It really pointed a lot of things out to you.
It did. It pointed out to me that the book was so pivotal in creating a place for me to love myself. Because I knew that I was not going to survive releasing this book unless I was so deeply grounded into who I am that nobody else could shake that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really good. And for people who aren't prepared to write a book, you can journal and get a lot of the same type of healing from just getting those thoughts out and putting them down on paper.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, there really is something to physically writing stuff out. Even verbally talking about it is helpful some, but the act of engaging some other part of the body to get that stuff out makes it less stuck bouncing around on the inside. Like, I don't know. I know they've done research that's shown that literally makes a difference to reduce like the pressure of all that stuff still staying inside. So it is important, like you said, Deidre, to, even if you're just journaling for yourself, or you could write stuff down and rip it up or burn it the next day if you want to. You don't have to necessarily keep it and even read it again. That was one of the things. There was a book and even a class that I've seen offered at places called The Artist's Way. And one of the things that's like crucial about that whole process when you're taking that class or going through that book is what they call morning papers or morning writing or whatever it's called, where every morning, as soon as you wake up, not even before coffee or before any of your normal rituals, you grab a pen and paper and you just write at least 3 pages worth of stuff. You don't worry about punctuation or spelling or grammar or anything. Just dump all the shit that's come up overnight as you're like dreaming or downloading other stuff. Boom, get it out on paper, and it can make a huge difference in how you face the rest of your day. So even if you're doing it on a regular basis like that, it may be different stuff on different days. It may be the same thing that keeps coming up for a week or 2 in a row. But yeah, just writing stuff out. Even I went to a book writing workshop one time, and the guy made us, for the first 2 hours or something, I think, handwrite everything. And then the next day when we came back to continue, we got to start typing. He's like, you got to start the process. It's like the magician pulling the handkerchief out or whatever that's tied to another, and just keeps going. It pulls more stuff out when you're physically taking the action to write it out.
Yes. Even my book, I initially, like I said, I was writing it on spiral bound notebooks, because to me the flow, I don't know, it was more of a release. It was more authentic than sitting at a computer and typing it out. Now, eventually I ended up on the computer. Right. That was my initial process.
Yep.
Wow. So in wrapping up, this has been awesome. We could keep talking for hours, I'm sure, Amber, about you and your book and your experiences and I have so many different ties in. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know. And then how many people have contacted you and said this, and how'd you respond? I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. Oh my gosh, because my first book, I Am Bound and Determined, when I sent that out, yeah, I got a phone call from my stepfather and wanting to talk to me about how I hurt my mom in the book, and then I got a call from my mom and had to go meet with her, and so it's a lot, but the courage to do it is awesome, and I commend you for that and for taking that healing journey and for stepping out for other women, because it's so important. What we all do is so important. And I just want to say one more thing. You wrote in your notes, I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but you wrote in your notes, oh my gosh, I know Deidre and I do something similar. I can talk about this. No. You talk about what is powerful for you. Okay. You talk about what you do best. I talk about what I do best. And Jenny talks about what she does best. If they overlap, awesome.
Right.
Awesome. Don't ever hold yourself small for me or Jenny or anyone. Sure. You talk about what's powerful for you, because you never know who's going to be listening. You never know who's going to be there. And you could say something that my perfect client could hear, and they're like, oh my gosh, I've heard Deidre talk about this before. I'm going to hire Deidre now. I am not offended that you bring up something that is in my wheelhouse. So you be you. I just want to encourage you to be you. And don't worry about stepping on my toes or Jenny's toes or anybody else's toes. If somebody gives you a hard time about stepping on their toes when you're going to be on their show, well, you don't need to be on their show. That's just my opinion.
True story.
True
True story.
You be your badass you, and I'll be my badass me, and Jenny will be badass her. All right.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about the type of work that you do with people now beyond just the book that you've published, I'm going to go ahead and put your social media things kind of up on the screen as you're talking.
Yeah,
so
great.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So how I work with people essentially is I help primarily women, but I also do work with men. I help them find the courage when they're ready. Again, you have to be ready to let go of some shit. And you have to be ready to step into the best version of yourself. And it's a process. So these women who are so used to living the life that everybody else has told them they need to live, for people who maybe feel lost about who they are because they're so used to wearing so many different masks, those are my people. I help you navigate and find out who you are at your core. Who is the person that you can wake up and look in the mirror at every day and fall in love with deeply every single time you see her? Who understands that you are your own medicine, that you are your own healer, that you don't need a guru outside of yourself. You have everything innately within you to soar in this life. And I'm going to help guide you to who that person is. And then once you find her and you fall so deeply in love with her, you have no problem using that voice to tell everybody else about who you are, because you have medicine to help them find their highest person and live their most authentic life. Because the problem is, in such a divisive society, we've lost who we are. That's why we're hurting. That's why we're coming after one another. Mm-hmm. If we only took the time to do the inner work to heal ourselves, there would be no need to fix anybody else, because we're so focused on the work in ourselves. So that's the work that I do.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for putting all of those, her links up, Jenny.
Sure.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, Jenny.
So Amber, that sounds like a bark if I ever heard one. Loving yourself, right? If we would just love ourselves, we could love other people. We wouldn't have the divisiveness. We could tear down all of the shit.
Right. Absolutely. Radical self-love.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate that.
Yay.
So thank you so much. I guess we're going to pause real briefly for a quick commercial break with our sponsor. What's the name again? Erskine?
Osrine.
Osrine, that's not even close.
Something like that. You had most of the right letters.
It's a lot of vowels. Anyway, we'll put that commercial up real quick. Hang on.
We'd like to mention our affiliate sponsor, Osrine Natural Skincare, a woman-owned business that offers a variety of skincare products that are 100% natural, cruelty-free, and handmade, using essential oils and herbal extracts. I've been using Osrine's Earthly Healer Lotion and noticed a wound healing significantly quicker than it had been without it. You can now get 10% off any of her products by going to osrineskincare.com/unleashedafpod. That's Osrine spelled AUSRINE skincare.com. Select your products and use Unleashed AF Pod as your discount code when you check out for 10% off.
Yay, here's the commercial.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to insert that later.
All right. All right, now we're back. Thank you so much for being with us today. Please join us next week. At the moment, I'm not sure what we're doing next week, but we'll announce it. We'll announce it and let you know. I just realized we're recording this one, and so it's for the end of July, and we're still in the middle of the July, so I don't know what the first one's going to be in August. This week, however, is going to be me, but of course, by the time this airs, it'll already have been done. So I don't know. Thank you so much for being with us. This is Deidre Beecham, Visibility Catalyst, helping you to, as a high-achieving woman, to get out of your own way, release your inner badass, release your inner voice, your power voice, and overcome imposter syndrome. And Jenny, my illustrious co-host, inner space engineer, make sure you visit her. She is an incredible hypnotherapist. We didn't talk about it this time, but oh my gosh, you've got to get one of her hypnotherapy tapes to change your life. But this has been Deidre Beecham and Jenny Badig, and we also have our guest today, which is Amber Powers. Thank you so much for being with us, Amber. And we hope that everybody has a fabulous week. Let me go ahead and get the outro here. Take care and let's get unleashed.
I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be